Hey everyone, Eric Hörst here, coming at you live with Training Cafe number 48. Live from Germany, I should add. Perhaps you saw my promotional video I posted a few minutes ago on the Training for Climbing Instagram channel, where I kind of teased the idea that just about 5 miles, probably less than that, over the hill behind me here is the world's most famous sport route, Action Direct. The world's first 514D put up, by Wolfgang Gulick 30 years ago, legendary first ascent. And just stone's throw from Action Direct is a 515A called Geocache. Those routes are short, powerful limestone routes hidden in the forest, the very wet forest here in Germany. So I'm over here on business and doing some climbing with my son, and it's not the weather we had hoped for, being that it's October, and in many mid-latitude areas, it's perhaps the best month of climbing to be had across the United States, across Europe, Asia. Often October is one of the best months. And unfortunately, we're told by the locals here, it was a very wet August. The ground is saturated, the forest is saturated, and even when the sun comes out, there's so much moisture in the air, and damp rock is ubiquitous. Today it's raining. I think it's in our 10 days we've been here, probably the 5th day that it's rained somewhat. And yeah, we've done some climbing and sent a few routes, but it's not quite what we had hoped. But we will continue on like pros and make the best of the weather and enjoy our time here in Germany, because we love the climbing, the people, and it's a trip to be enjoyed regardless of the conditions being less than ideal. I think that's true anytime you go climbing. It's rarely that you get a stretch of perfect weather for your whole trip. You're going to face some adversity, hot days, cold days, wet days. So as a climber, you kind of go with the blows. That's what you signed up for when you are an outdoor climber, is that conditions aren't always perfect. And so you proceed with style and adjust your plans as needed, and hopefully still make a memorable trip out of it. And we will, for sure. So in any case, this Training Cafe, as always, I have a main topic, and today's main topic is what you can do to climb your best this Rocktober, as many folks call it. Here in Germany, the Oktoberfest has been canceled because of COVID, so there'll be no drinking of beer, at least not in the streets. And but there will be still some ascending going on, and there's a lot of climbers here scattered throughout the Frankenjura, and Cameron and I have had a few good days despite the rainy conditions, and we have another week or a bit more to hopefully send a few more routes if we can get some drier weather to set up over us here. And hopefully you have some outdoor climbing scheduled, whether it's a few weekend trips or maybe a longer trip this October. And I want to try to give you some insight into kind of how to hopefully do your best. And if you have a bit of a project lined up for this month, what you can do to send that project and help you climb your best. I guess regardless of whether you're projecting or just out climbing for fun, it's always great to kind of do the things that set you up for success and set you up for maybe a few of those low gravity days when weather and, I guess your body, your recovery, your training, everything lines up perfectly, and you kind of feel super light and super strong. And, those low gravity days are a beautiful thing when they happen. And often that's when you send your hardest route. And so some of the things are kind of out of control, like the weather, and then some things are in your control, like your sleep habits and nutrition and your training or taper of training heading up to your trip. Those are all very important things to try to line up the best you can. Before we get to that main topic and then to some of your questions, of course, this is the Training Cafe, so we shall sip together. Now, here in Germany, Central European time, it's dinner time at 6 p.m. So I don't drink coffee in the evening. So I will toast with you with this is a glass of peach mango supercharged collagen, which on my rest and recovery day, this rainy day, I'm feeding my tendons with what they need to recover from pulling little edges and pockets here in the Frankenmuir. So with your coffee or favorite beverage, let's toast together. Climbers around the world, unite. Let's commune with supercharged collagen or your coffee. And so let's push ahead here and get to the main topic. And then in 5 or 10 minutes, I'll get to your questions. I see a couple of questions typed in here in the comments bar. If you're watching on the Training for Climbing YouTube page or Training for Climbing Instagram page, you can enter a brief question and I will do my best to give you a good answer here in just a little bit. But in terms of, oh, I almost forgot the shout out. We sipped and we always shout out. And the shout out here, I got a couple of them. First of all, reflecting back a few weeks ago on the World Championship in Moscow, Russia, a couple of American ladies crushed there. Brooke Raboutou getting 5th place in lead climbing. So a super strong showing by Brooke all year. She's had a tremendous season with a couple of World Cup medals. And Natalia Grossman, who's really been on a tear, has, you know, at least for many folks, come out of nowhere, but we've known about her in the United States for a couple of years. And Natalia just destroyed, you know, a couple of gold medals in the World Cup circuit, a couple of silver, a couple of bronze. And at the World Championship in Moscow, she won silver in the ladies' lead climbing. So a great end to her season and super awesome to see, you know, a couple of 20-year-old climbers, Brooke and Natalia, and they happen to be like best friends and training partners doing so well this season. That is totally awesome. And it's also great that they use PhysiVantage products. So it's great to have Natalia on the team PhysiVantage. And the other shout out is to an American man who also did really well this competition season, Sean Baily. But this shout out is for him and his ascent, the third ascent of bibliography in Seus, a 515C, one of the world's hardest climbs. And Sean worked on it for quite some time during the summer and early fall season, and he ticked it off about a week ago, and that's pretty awesome. And actually, I guess one more shout out, Laura Rogora, the young Italian climber, really upcoming star in both the competition and outdoor climbing season, sent I guess the second ascent of Stefano Gastolfi route in Italy, rated 515 BC. So perhaps the hardest red point by a female climber ever. So that's pretty awesome, and congrats to Laura. Okay, so we got the sip and we got the shout out behind us. Now we move on to the main topic and then on to your questions. If you type a couple of them in, I will get to them in just a moment. How to set yourself up for a great Rocktober? Well, first of all, know your mission. You need, you know, to achieve something great usually comes out of being kind of mission-based. It's a concept that I guess, you know, is perhaps intuitive to climbers because we are very goal-setted people, you know, goal-oriented people. But taking a mission mindset kind of escalates it even more than just a goal. And that's something I kind of learned, you know, and first kind of embraced this concept or had it introduced to me, you know, from a climber's perspective by Todd Skinner, who decades ago, you know, in getting to know him and discuss training and performance and goals with him, he was a very mission-based person. He not only had an imminent mission often in mind, you know, what was his short-term mission, but he had missions planned out years in advance. And the short-term mission was almost a stepping stone for the longer-term missions. And so, you know, if you're a pro climber, you got to think long-term and think that way. Perhaps if you're more of a weekend warrior or recreational climber, well, your mission is just to climb your best when you go bouldering or go cragging on the weekend. But most climbers, if they're into it for a few years and training seriously, do have goals, to break into a new grade or send some long-term project or route goal, visit some crag and send some meaningful route. And so to have that mission well defined and then to develop a system for putting you in a place to potentially achieve and win means understanding the route, what the mission is, what it's going to require, what assets do you need? Do you need more strength? Do you need power endurance? Do you need aerobic endurance if it's a really long route? And then, of course, in the weeks leading up to your trip to the route, training specifically. If you're going on a bouldering trip, it doesn't make sense to spend the prior 2 months, doing a lot of route climbing in preparation for a bouldering trip. If you want to boulder your very best. And conversely, if you're heading on a sport climbing trip, say to the Red, then it doesn't make sense to spend the weeks leading up to that trip to the Red bouldering. That's not to say that bouldering can't be part of your larger training program this past season, because that's good for learning to do hard moves and developing, limit strength and such. So bouldering certainly is an appropriate part of the program. But if you're heading to the Red, where you are really physiologically tested more your aerobic energy system and to some degree the anaerobic reserve, and maybe on single hardest moves limit strength, but that's not the limiting constraint most of the time at the Red. So you're better off doing things that train up that anaerobic reserve and the climbing specific aerobic energy system in the month or two prior to a Red River Gorge trip. And so, again, tailoring your training for the upcoming trip or for the mission, the climb that you're after is an important first step. Now, given that it's now October 5th and maybe your trip is a week away, well, it's too late to really do any meaningful training. You can't cram when it comes to training. That's a common mistake, definitely a newbie mistake, and some very experienced climbers I know make that mistake too, where they're heading on a weekend climbing trip and they go to the gym on a Thursday and destroy themselves, thinking that's going to help them climb their best on Saturday. And it's actually not. It's going to help them not climb their best on Saturday, because if you destroy yourself on Thursday, you're not going to be 100% by the weekend. And so that is where planning out those final days before a trip or before a weekend of climbing is important. If you're going on a longer trip, a couple of weeks, let's say a trip, so you're coming out of a training block and then heading on a trip for a few weeks, you actually want to think in terms of a taper over the final week of training, where you kind of keep intensity high, but you reduce the volume the last week. And then, of course, that does then taper into perhaps 2 or even 3 nearly complete rest days before that longer trip. So you can fully recover, all of the energy systems, your nervous system, and be ready to go for that 1 or 2 or 3 week trip. Now, if you're going on weekend ventures, bouldering or cragging, well, then you don't really need a taper over that week. You might train quite hard on Tuesday and even on Wednesday, but then you want to really take it easy on Thursday and Friday so that you can recover. And that's not to say you have to take total rest on Thursday, but it should be very easy climbing, a light kind of recovery session, movement session on Thursday, whereas on Tuesday and perhaps Wednesday, you did more rigorous training. And then Thursday's, kind of active recovery. And then Friday, maybe some mobility work, maybe, some light antagonist or, generalized aerobic training. But I really think Friday should be a total rest day if you are going to climb hard on a weekend, a Saturday and a Sunday. And perhaps you're driving on a Friday. heading into that weekend climbing trip. So it's important to plan out the 3 to 5 days leading up to that weekend trip and plan out the final maybe week or 10 days before you leave on a longer trip, so you can get that taper and that recovery right. So that's kind of the first step to setting yourself up for a Rocktober where you can climb your best. And I guess once you get to your destination, get to your mission. Get to your project route, or if you're going to a crag or a bouldering area for a week or two, start doing some reconnaissance work on your project, your boulder, from the get-go. Yes, you need to do a little bit of warm-up climbing, obviously, and warm-up activities. You don't jump on the project cold or the boulder cold. So you might do some warm-up boulders, some warm-up routes. But I think the first day you want to get on the project. If it's a route, go bolt to bolt, or a trad route, get to work, on it. If it's a boulder, start to suss it out, feel up the moves, feel the holds, brush the holds, try to climb it in parts, make some leeway, kind of get an understanding of what it's going to take to send the project or the route or the boulder. And maybe you'll send it the first day if you're well rested, and if it's kind of, within your reach, something that maybe caters to your strength, or something that's not next level for you, you might send it really quickly, but maybe not. And so then that's where you have to take on, a bit of a self-coaching role, and know how many days you have to work on the route and potentially send it. Is it just a 2-day trip, or is it a 2-week trip? What is your timeline for working the problem? And then investing your energy wisely, in terms of, you don't want to destroy yourself on day one if there's a chance you can work it day one and maybe send it day two, or work it day one, rest day two, and send it day three. And so to get drawn off on some tangents and working on other projects, or to just destroy yourself on day one so that you're too sore to send it day two, and maybe even not recovered enough day three, because when you really destroy yourself hard on a project, or a long, hard day of climbing, one rest day often doesn't get you back to 100%. You might think you're back to 100%, but you're not. And if your project is near limit or at your limit, you're not going to send it at 90%. You need to be darn near 100% to take it down. And so sometimes there's a benefit to, on day one, calling it quits a little early, getting some food into, some protein, some carbohydrate into earlier in the day, rather than waiting till a late dinner. Get that recovery process started, and kind of, put yourself in the best position you can to recover, so you can give it a good attempt the next day or after one rest day. And so I guess kind of the bottom line is planning your energy use, investing your energy wisely. And then the other side of the coin is what you can do to accelerate recovery, what you consume throughout the day. Now, I don't think climbers should be eating a lot of food during the day when they're climbing. It's just not good to have a lot of food sloshing around in your belly, and your body diverts blood flow to your stomach to aid digestion. And those aren't things you want if you're climbing for performance. So, while you're at the crag, it's more about snacking, half a bagel sandwich for lunch and the other half of the bagel sandwich mid-afternoon, or a couple of protein bars evenly spaced throughout the day. Drinking water, of course, is prudent, but you don't need to be eating tons of food if you're out at the boulders or crags for 6 or 8 hours. Now, you do need a good, well-rounded meal at the end of the day, with carbohydrate and hopefully some vegetables, and also a good protein source. And if you're not going to consume a piece of meat as a protein source, well, then a protein drink whether it's a whey protein shake or a plant-based protein shake. Very, very important, because your muscles and connective tissues are, the structures are comprised of protein and water. And of course, inside the muscle cells, there's some sugar in the form of glycogen that you need carbohydrate to replenish. But to rebuild connective tissues and muscles, you need protein. And so being protein deficient is not something a hard climbing individual wants to do. And climbers who starve themselves set themselves up for injury and slow recovery, because in the process of eating scantily, they don't get enough protein. Or if they're eating a mainly plant-based diet, again, it's very easy to be protein deficient, and that slows recovery and potentially also sets you up for injury. So you want to be sure you're consuming enough protein throughout the day, and especially at the end of the day, to help support the building and recovery process. And then, getting enough sleep. If you're at one of these popular climbing areas at a camping site where climbers tend to gather, it's easy to be up late by the campfire drinking beer. But drinking a few beers and being up late is counterproductive. Let's be honest. It's not going to help you send your project the next day. It might be fun, but it would be more fun to do that after you sent your project than before you sent your project. And so I am definitely one to have a send beer, as I call it, after a good day of climbing or after I send a hard route. It's a reward, but I'm not someone who drinks beer every night after I climb or every night after I train, because I take my training seriously, and it is counterproductive, as is a lot of late nights. Your body, your nervous system, your brain, which really drives all of your climbing skill, need appropriate recovery, appropriate time, that downtime. And if you're an active athlete, a hard training athlete, 8 hours is really the minimum. And, in our everyday lives, it's hard for many of us. I often don't get 8 hours, but when I'm on a climbing trip, I make that a number one goal. Like, as important as my meal, as important as my warm up, that 8 hours sleep is mandatory, because if you're not getting that, you're not climbing your best. And I have a lot of climbers, pro climbers, have told me over the years, they actually think getting 10 or even 11 hours of sleep is most beneficial to them if they're, trying to climb hard, 4 or 5 days a week, which is really hard on the body, hard on the nervous system, and it's hard on your brain. Quality sleep is a real asset. And conversely, if you have a lot of sleepless nights, or nights where you're tossing and turning and you're waking up and you're never getting into that deep sleep where your brain kind of reorganizes and regenerates, and your body is fully restful, those types of disturbed nights of sleep are tough on you. And when you get them back-to-back nights, it really is a bad thing that can, is far from ideal, let's say, that is for sure. And, alcohol, while it tends to make most people fall asleep more easily, it's not a good sleep. It's more of a disturbed, tossing and turning sleep, where your brain doesn't, quiet down. And that's another reason to, if you're really serious about performance, maybe at critical times abstain from alcohol, and when you do consume it, not over indulge in the alcohol. Again, everybody's got to kind of have that weighing of priorities, and if you're really serious about performance and you've done all this training and you've been thinking about the project and looking forward to the trip, then why would you want to sabotage? It's really a form of self-sabotage when you get on a trip and then do all these things that are counterproductive to what you really want. If you're not getting good sleep, if you are drinking, if you're eating shit food, if you're going to the crag and getting off on tangents rather than staying on mission, these are all things that are kind of a form of self-sabotage. And so, that's something that I think, certainly for younger climbers, it's easy to go off on those tangents. And, that certainly it did happen to me, I guess, in my younger days at times. But, for the more mature, more serious, certainly pro climbers who take it really seriously, know how to get on mission and stay on mission. In the past year, the classic example of that is Daniel Woods, when he was working on Return of the Sleepwalker out in the desert. It was a multi-month process for him where he went through this reinvention of himself, where he did give up, alcohol and other drugs that maybe were used recreationally at times throughout his life, and he gave that all up and took his diet very seriously, took nutritional supplements, Physimanage, of course, and did everything he could do to take it to the next level. And he did when he sent Return of the Sleepwalker, because I think a strong case has been made for it being V17, likely the world's second hardest, or perhaps most hardest, boulder problem. And so he sacrificed a lot to get that done. And so for each of us in our own way, if you're serious about leveling up and taking it, doing your hardest ever route or achieving a big goal, sacrifice is part of the process. That's just, part of human achievement, no matter what the achievement is, whether it's in school or in career or in sports. The ones who achieve greatly sacrifice greatly, whether it's Tom Brady in the NFL or whether it's Tommy Caldwell, Don Wall, or Daniel Woods sending V17. All of those people were on a mission and sacrificed greatly for a long time in the quest to complete their mission. And so each of us has to, in our own way, kind of find what is appropriate and what is best and what is needed to reach their goals. Okay, so enough with Coach Hörst and his views of Rocktober Fest performance and just overall human performance, which I'm a big fan of studying as well. Let's get to some of these questions that have been typed in here. And I will wrap things up in about 15 minutes and try to keep this. It's dinner time here in Germany, and so I need to do my refueling for hopefully getting out and climbing on some, if I can find some dry rock tomorrow. So, okay, so first up, Mickey Rose Rodriguez says he's heading to the Red River Gorge soon. 20 days out from a Red River Gorge trip. Been bouldering the past month. Excuse me. Doing max hangs. How should I taper training? Well, I already addressed this kind of a little bit in my previous discussion. Red River Gorge, unless you're going there to boulder, which perhaps you are, but I'm going to assume that you're going there to route climb, then you have already done all you can do to get your strength up, to a high level with the bouldering and the 753 protocols. So good job on that. And so your last 3 weeks, or at least the next 2 weeks, I would really focus on route climbing. If you have access to a climbing gym or a climbing area where you can get on a rope and get pumped, do that. Because if you're route climbing at the Red, you need to get some of those soft adaptations for both the aerobic and anaerobic lactic energy systems. And the soft adaptations are biochemical, relating to enzymes and lactate transporters. And those are things you can spin up in 2 weeks of route-specific training, route training, getting pumped and learning to climb while being pumped. The goal is not to climb to pump out to failure, though that may happen on occasion. The most beneficial training is kind of that threshold training where you climb into the very pumpy zone, but then are able to rest and climb through the pump. And that is what you're after to train up for climbing at the Red. And so that's what I would focus the last 2 weeks on. And then your taper, probably no climbing the last 2 or 3 days before going to the red, so that you can be fully recovered when you get there. So hopefully that helps you out a little bit there. Okay. Next question. Is there an advantage to your 753, that's my max strength protocol, as compared with individual 5 to 7 second max hangs followed by longer rests? They are both good, effective max strength protocols. I think if you're going to just do single hang sets, you mentioned 5 to 7 seconds. I think it's better to be more in the 7 to 12 second range, maybe 10 to 12 seconds even. If you're just doing a one hang max set followed by, say, a 3 to 5 minute rest, I think it's better to be, more like the 10 or 12 second duration. The goal there is to completely fatigue the fast twitch fibers. If you're doing one arm hanging, as many advanced or pro climbers do, then I think the 5 to 7 seconds is the right number, because you're going to fully recruit, that one hand, the finger flexor muscles. 7 seconds is probably about your limit. But if you're doing two-handed training on a hangboard, say weighted hangs, then I think maybe more like 10 or 12 seconds should be your target. The 753 is a protocol I've developed that kind of is like doing a 3-rep max set in weightlifting or in powerlifting. And so the 7 second hang, it's not quite to your limit. It's not precipitating failure. You're using a weight that makes you work hard for 7 seconds, but maybe there's 2 or 3 seconds left in the tank. And then the 53-second rest, the aerobic energy system is working to regenerate some creatine phosphate in the finger flexor muscles, but it's just a partial regeneration, because it takes 3 minutes to fully regenerate creatine phosphate. So the 53 seconds gets you about 50% regeneration, and then you're back on for another 7-second hang, which again doesn't quite take you to the limit. Maybe you have a second or two left in the tank, but you're off. And then you're on to your next 53-second rest. And then you do another 7-second hang. And so that is another way to really deeply fatigue the fast twitch fibers. They get partial recovery between the 3 hangs. And then after the third 7-second hang, then you take your 3 to 5 minute rest and get more complete recovery. And so typically after a thorough warm up, you might do 2 or 3, or for a really advanced climber, maybe 4 sets of that 753 protocol. Whereas again, if you're doing just single set max hangs, single hangs with a 3 to 5 minute rest, maybe you're doing 5 or 6 of those single hang, kind of to the limit hangs as part of your max strength training. And so I think, it's kind of 6 one half dozen the other, the very, very similar results out of the two. Again, if you're doing one-handed training, I think then maybe the single 5 to 7 second hang is the way to go. But if you're doing two-handed training, and if you're training different grips like pocket grips and crimp and open hand and drag on a, say, a beast maker, then I think the 753 is a great way to go. And I think that's probably how most climbers watching this video should be training. But if you're super strong, if you can hold a 20 millimeter edge with one hand, that's a pro level achievement. You're probably a 514 or V14 climber if you can do that. Or near that level, well then, perhaps you're in the class that needs to do more of the one-handed hangboard training for strength than two-handed. Okay, next question. When to time the antagonist training during the week? Okay, well, if you're the typical climber where maybe you're doing 2 sessions in the gym climbing or bouldering or system walling, say Tuesday, Thursday, or Monday, Wednesday, you could do your antagonist training on the off days. So if you're a Tuesday, Thursday trainer, or Tuesday, Wednesday, or Monday, Wednesday, you could, on off days, do your antagonist training. And again, it should not be a long, exhaustive workout. You're not doing a bodybuilding workout. If you are, you're doing the wrong program, or you have a coach steering you the wrong way. Your antagonist training should be mostly body weight exercises. There might be a little bit of weight training involved, but it's not a bodybuilder's program. It should involve some rotator cuff work. It should involve some scapular stabilizer work, and a selection of pushing exercises: shoulder press, bench press, dips. Again, body weight exercises can be very effective, and some weight training, as long as it's not a program that bulks you up. You're not a bodybuilder, you're not a CrossFitter. And so those antagonist sessions are 30 to 60 minutes at the most on those off days. Or if you're more of a pro level climber or a really advanced trainer where you're doing some 2-a-day training, where you're doing a morning and an evening workout or a morning and an afternoon workout, it's possible that one of those sessions is a climbing session and one of them is an antagonist session. What I will sometimes do is an antagonist session in the morning, kind of when I'm waking up, because it's not a rigorous workout. It's not a balls to the wall, max strength workout that you're doing with the antagonist. It's more about strength endurance. Building strength endurance in your scapular stabilizers and your rotator cuff muscles is very important to hold up and keep your shoulders stable through a long day of climbing, or a long rigorous route, or a long powerful boulder problem. It's strength endurance that you're building. That's something you can do in the morning and then be pretty much fully recovered from, that it won't affect an afternoon climbing session. And so that's another way to go about those antagonist sessions, shooting for 2 a week. Some people, if they're really on a tough schedule with work, school, family, and there's just not a lot of training time, you could blend in a little bit of antagonist work with a longer, let's say you're doing a 2 or 3 hour gym climbing workout. You might, as part of your warm-up, do a little bit of rotator cuff and scapular stabilizer work, Ys and Ts on a sling trainer, let's say, maybe a set of bench press, a set of dips. Do that as part of your thorough warm-up, and then do your climbing workout. And then if you want to do a little bit more push activity at the end, a few sets of dips, let's say, you could do that at the end of your session. And me, if you've been listening to me a long time, I'm against kind of this shotgun approach to training where you go to the gym and do everything in a session. Not the most effective way to train. But, for some folks, if you only get 2 sessions in the gym a week and you got to throw everything in, on one day, sometimes there's no options other than to do that. Or maybe you can do some of your antagonist training at home. That would be another option, is go to the gym and do your climbing workout, and then find ways to, do a bit of an antagonist session at home, push-ups, dips, maybe you have a sling trainer at home, a few dumbbells at home, and you can do that, as kind of a fill-in session at home when you, don't need to go to a gym to do necessarily an antagonist session. Okay, and this is just a continuation on the previous question. So we shall move on here. Eric, do you have or can you recommend a good training plan that is affordable? I can't. There are a lot of coaches out there who will sell you programs. Some of them might be terrific programs. Some of them maybe not so terrific. If you're a beginner level climber, then one of these cookie cutter programs you can download off the internet might work for a period of time. The more advanced you are, the more personalized and tailored the program needs to be effective. And that's where it's better to engage a coach who can work with you personally. A few of our PhysiVantage athletes and coaches that take on clients, Matt Foltz has his company, and Leaf Gash, and there are a few others. I don't want to go down a long laundry list, but there are some climbing coaches who have proven through their own climbing they know what they're doing, and hopefully they're able to share that with you and provide some useful guidance. But again, I don't have anybody specific that I say you should work with. And really, I think the best thing is to work one-on-one in person with a coach, if that's possible. If in your town there's a climbing gym with a proven veteran coach, that would be ideal. Someone with a decade or more of experience is very important. There's a lot of newbie coaches out there that might be able to do a fine job with beginner level climbers, but to coach at the highest level or at a high level, you need a veteran coach who's seen hundreds or thousands of climbers, who can really give expert instruction on movement and mental training. And to download a cookie cutter program off the internet for $30 or whatever isn't going to help that more advanced climber who needs the more nuanced instruction. Of course, my books like Training for Climbing and the Rock Climber's Exercise Guide, and even my mental training book, which is called Maximum Climbing, there are tables, and my Training for Climbing website has an Excel spreadsheet that you can download that gives kind of a template for training. You might visit some of those. If you go to the trainingforclimbing.com website and search training programs, you'll find those templates that I created that marry with the Training for Climbing book. But it really demands that you be the coach, you self-coach, and have gained enough knowledge from reading the book and from your other studies to use the template and use the book, the exercises in the book, and come to generate and design, self-prescribe, I guess you would say, a program that's ideal for you. And some climbers are really good at that. If maybe through past sports history, they have developed a good intuitive sense of their body and the training response their body gets from workouts. And then other people, maybe not. And, there's some people who really thrive on having a coach give them a program and have a checklist of exercises to do and follow. And if that's you, then those templates aren't the right thing, and working with a coach one-on-one is. Okay, Steve says, yeah, hectic corporate job is, if you're really deep into a career, or perhaps deep into a career and a family, it is tough, to get meaningful training days in. That's where if you can build a home wall, have some training equipment at home, a hangboard where you can warm up and put in a good workout in just 30 to 60 minutes at home and not have to deal with a commute to the climbing gym, that can be really time efficient. Of course, if you can get to a really top-notch gym where you can do a bouldering session one day and then visit another day in the week and do a route session, that's a great thing too, and can be really effective to helping you climb your best when you have maybe those rare days outside and you really want to make the most of them. Being able to incorporate some training into that busy job schedule is quite helpful. Okay, from Mike from Minneapolis, thank you for the respect there. When to ice and when not to, where to draw the line and letting the body do its thing and not, yeah. So this is a really good topic. Heat and ice can be beneficial to your body in certain situations, and it can be counterproductive in other situations. And there's a lot of conflicting information out there. There's companies that sell you can go in and do the cryotherapy where you immerse your body for a minute into sub-zero or whatever, some crazy cold temperature, and it's supposed to be a miracle. And oftentimes those things, that if they're promoted as being a miracle, they're not. But there is some benefit. And so in terms of ice, if there's an acute injury, you have a pulley tweak, you have a muscle pull, you take a fall and have a contusion, an impact injury, twisted ankle, ice is a good thing, without a doubt. In immediately after an acute injury, the first 12 to 24 to maybe 36 hours. After that, the ice doesn't really provide much benefit as you get longer distant from that acute injury. In terms of just general muscle soreness, I'm not a big fan of ice. And now, my sons both played tackle football throughout their school years, right up through high school. And the day after a football game, you're not only physically sore from the rigors of playing football, but also from the impacts of football. And so after a football game might be a pretty good time to take an ice bath for a half an hour to deal with the swelling, the impacts, the muscle soreness. But climbing's not that kind of sport. So to jump in an ice bath after a bouldering session, or to ice your muscles after a workout, I don't think is beneficial, and it can be counterproductive in that the inflammatory response. A mild or modest inflammatory response is part of what signals your body to adapt. And so if you suppress that inflammation, you are suppressing the signals for adaptations and potentially shortchanging yourself on the gains that you are triggering from your workout. Now, again, if you're severely strained a muscle, tweaked a pulley, yes, I would go home and put some ice on it. And I do that when I feel like some tenderness in a finger or an elbow. If it's chronic, if you have chronic elbow pain or chronic finger pain, the ice isn't going to do you any good. And neither will consuming ibuprofen day in and day night. In fact, there's increasing research that chronic use of NSAIDs slows collagen synthesis and slows recovery. If you go get your knee operated on, your shoulder operated on, if your surgeon knows what he's doing, he will instruct you to not take ibuprofen or Advil in the days and weeks after surgery because of the suppression of collagen synthesis. And so if you need a pill for pain, Tylenol would be okay, but an NSAID would not. And similarly, ice, while in a case of an acute injury is okay, day in and day out would not be ideal. And in terms of heat, I do personally like heat on my muscles as part of a recovery process, like on a rest day, putting some heat on a muscle to enhance circulation. I actually have a infrared sauna at my house. I don't use it on a daily basis, but I use it sporadically throughout my training cycle or season. It's beneficial for circulation and generating heat shock proteins kind of ahead of a trip to give me more resilience. And I think there's some benefit to sauna use for sure. But again, anything that suppresses the mild inflammatory response, even megadosing vitamin C, vitamin E, antioxidants, 20, 30 years ago, and I even wrote about and did these things 20, 30 years ago. There was a period there where runners and triathletes and rock climbers and mountaineers, we thought, we're going to megadose vitamin C each and every day year round because it's so good to consume all these antioxidants. And years later, we now know from the research that that's counterproductive because it reduces the hormetic effect. Again, your body needs to encounter reactive oxygen species and have mild inflammation and all the chemicals that are released in response to a rigorous workout or day of climbing or running. And that's what triggers adaptation. So of course, small doses of vitamin C are essential. So I'm not saying to avoid vitamin C, but don't megadose it. Don't megadose any antioxidant. But consuming foods that have antioxidants in them is good. Tart cherry, curcumin, there are natural supplements that can do a really good job at giving some relief from muscle soreness and pain that won't adversely affect collagen synthesis, won't adversely affect adaptations, like using ice after every workout would, or using ibuprofen after every workout would. Okay, so there's a long answer to a short, simple question. But again, a lot of nuances needed to really answer these things correctly. And there is a lot of misinformation out there. In this internet era, it's wonderful because you have access to so much research. You can go to ResearchGate and view the latest research, and ideally look for meta-analyses, which are really the gold standard in giving you the bottom line on a topic. No single study gives you that bottom line, but a meta-analysis will. But you go on Instagram and there's all this stuff being tweeted out day in and day out, and I think I see more bad information than good information oftentimes, particularly on Instagram, because it just happens. People are tweeting out little brief anecdotes. Really, that's what it is, anecdotes. And anecdotes are more often false or misleading than they are factual. So with that, I guess I will wrap things up here. It's been about 50 minutes streaming at you live from Germany. And cross your fingers we get some dry weather here so that we can make the most of our trip. The business for the trip has been achieved. So that mission is completed. Now my mission is to try to send it 8A if I can. And so wish me luck on that one. We sip one more time my supercharged collagen, and perhaps if you're in the United States and it's lunchtime, some coffee. And 2 weeks from now, I'll be back in the States, and we'll meet again on a Monday, as usual, at noon for Training Cafe number 49. But for today, signing off from the Franken Euro. Have a good one.